Welcome to Leading for Impact, a podcast about what it really takes to lead through complexity, change, and uncertainty while staying grounded in purpose and impact. I'm Bruce from Huddle Up, and each conversation on this show is designed to create space for reflection, not just on what's broken, but on what's possible, what matters, and what must endure. Today, we're talking about something leaders across the country are experiencing. Special education is entering a new era. Rising needs, an evolving workforce, and pressure to remain in compliance with state and federal regulations are reshaping how districts deliver services. We are excited to be joined by Dr. Kara Anderson, Director of Special Programs at St. Joseph School District in Missouri. With experience spanning classroom teaching, school leadership, and district-level special education oversight, Dr. Anderson brings a grounded, holistic perspective on what leadership requires in this moment. And as always, we're joined by our host, Keith Kostrzewski, Huddle Up's Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships and Growth. And with that, I'll kick it over to Keith to get us started.
So this is very excited about the conversation today. We'll introduce Dr. Anderson, but it's echoing what the prior conversations we had. When Dr. Anderson stepped into her role as Director of Special Programs in St. Joseph, Missouri, the district needed 28 speech pathologists. They had 14. One position had been open for 4 years. So most districts facing that math, they do the same thing. You post the job again, you raise the bonus, and you wait. It's not atypical, and it's not a bad strategy, but not one that was going to work for St. Joe's. Dr. Anderson did not wait. This is a conversation about what happens when a leader stops accepting the constraints everyone else has agreed to live with. Today, we're thrilled to have Dr. Kara Anderson to share her personal journey and the great work being done in St. Joseph School District. Dr. Anderson has seen special education from every seat in the building. She started as a classroom teacher, she became a principal, recognized as one of the strongest new leaders in her region, and now she runs the special programs operations for the district. She has seen this work from the classroom, from the building, and now from the district seat. Welcome, Dr. Anderson, and thank you so much for your time today.
Yes. Hi, Keith. How are you?
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Love the green theme today. It's great. St. Patrick's Day, both
St.
on the wall.
Patrick. Yes.
I know. The walls are
Patrick
reflecting.
today.
Excellent. So before we talk about any type of virtual services or partnerships or where you are today, I'd love to go back to your classroom days. Leadership decisions like the ones that we're about to talk about do not start in the boardroom. They start in probably rooms like that with your other colleagues. When you started as a special education teacher, what initially drew you to that path?
Yeah. So originally I was going to be an SLP, shockingly. And I did, as a student in high school, I went and I went and observed our SLP providing services and played games with students with speech or language issues. And within a period of time there, my younger brother was also diagnosed with a learning disability. He was struggling in school himself, which is something I had not experienced. And I watched him become very defeated with school. And I often would help him at home with different strategies, accommodations, modifications, like typing his papers while he would say them out loud to me, things like that. And so I changed my path from the SLP work to special education and elementary education as my degree.
That's wonderful. And we often hear that personal connection brings clarity to purpose. And that's a wonderful story. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So as you move from the classroom to the building to the district seat, what changed how you saw special education now that you went from the SLP to more of the broader special education role? What changed about how you view it?
Yeah, so when you're in the classroom, it's really just about what you encounter and experience, and you don't know for sure what's happening out in the real world, what's happening at the district level or in other buildings for that matter. Um, so I served as a middle school special education teacher for part of my career, and then I moved into the principalship, and I saw different providers and different ways of servicing students. and then noticed when I was a principal, we were struggling. Like, oftentimes my building did not have a provider, and we would have to send letters home saying that students were not being provided their speech language minutes. Um, and then they would have to make up huge amounts of compensatory services for those students, and it was frustrating, on my end, one, because I knew the obligations that we had, under special education because of my degree, but then also that piece really hurt my heart for the students and the families. The families were frustrated that their students weren't getting serviced, and the students weren't making the progress that we needed to see from them. Um, and then when stepping into this role, the view changed even more because it wasn't just one building that I was worried about. It was the entire district from early childhood clear up through 12th grade that we were trying to service. And how did that look at each level, to make sure students were getting their provided services?
So that is a step up in perspective and also responsibility.
Yes.
So to follow up with that, how, if you could articulate at the time when you stepped into that district role, what were some of the challenges facing bringing in those providers? If you, is it
Yeah.
pandemic? What were
So
the challenges?
yeah, we've explored a lot of things. So again, because had served in the principal role and had actually not had an SLP for portions of my leadership, I knew that it was an issue, but I didn't know that it was as big of an issue as it was. Many of our in-person SLPs were just burnout. They were being asked to do far more than they could really manage. And the former leadership had worked with a company to bring in some contracted services, which we still also bring in some contracted employees. But that wasn't enough, and they weren't exploring other ways of finding providers. And again, I knew we needed about 28 to provide the appropriate amount of services district wide, pre-K through 12. We also had expanded our early childhood center during this time, and so our number had blown up, and we weren't able to provide all of those services that we needed for those students. And so again, I started exploring what are options with contracted services. I would go to district SPED meetings, not district, but area SPED meetings, and listen to conversations. And we're really lucky in the fact that we are a larger district, and many of the small districts don't have any in-person therapists at all. And they talked to me at the time about this company that they were using, called .com Therapy, and which is now Huddle Up. So I said, well, I've got to do something because it wasn't an option for us. I wasn't going to allow it to be an option for us to not provide services because that can get you in legal trouble. Our obligation is that we exhaust all efforts to find and provide the services as necessary. And I didn't want it to get to the point where we were burning out all of our in-person therapists. So that's kind of what I saw when I came in, like, "Oh, here's what we've tried, here's what we need," and found out from some other colleagues around the area that this might be an option.
So maybe thank you for sharing that journey. And I take this question in two parts. Let me know which way you want to do it.
Yeah.
What was your initial, having been not only the personal connection to a student that needs the services, and then being in the classroom as a principal, what was your initial reaction to virtual? Understanding it led to a solution, but what was your initial reaction? Would love to hear that. And then
Yeah.
and then some of your colleagues and kind of that shifting the conversation about we are going to provide services and this is a good option. So I'd just love to hear that perspective.
Yeah. So my initial reaction was I want an in-person therapist. But I had exhausted all efforts. We had raised pay, we'd provided incentives. We gave national board stipend. We give a case management stipend. We've done everything that we could to recruit individuals in person and through the contracted companies, and we weren't getting anywhere. And so I'm like, okay, let's think about the population of students that we know that this will work with or possibly will work with. So that's why we started small and we started at secondary because high school students, We'd been through COVID and many of them had done online learning. So, like, okay, our students that aren't severe or profound that we know can access a computer. And that's really how we started with Huddle Up is at our high school level. And it was really one or two that we did not have a service provider for, and that's how we started. And then again, as it's evolved, we've lost more in-person providers, and we're really in a desert here where there are not SLPs that are just coming out of the woodwork. So that was my initial, thought. It's not going to work, but we need to try something. Not providing services isn't an option for me because I didn't want to put the district, at that risk. And but I'm gonna say that I've been pleasantly surprised with the virtual services that Huddle Up has provided. Um, what was the second part of your question? Want to make sure.
I guess no, it's thank you so much for that detail. I think the colleagues, and now once you felt
Mhm.
that you had a mission to serve your students kind of at all cost,
Yeah,
exploring different options. Um, there has to be some coalition building that you do, right, to move the
yeah,
forward. So, you tell me a little bit about that, and who were some of the stakeholders that you had to bring along the journey with you, and then maybe some of the key elements of building trust with a partner that is not
yeah,
in the building with you, virtual, and we all know digital has
yeah,
its challenges. But I just love to hear a little bit more about that.
yeah. Well, convincing colleagues, it really wasn't an option, I guess. So I started out by standing in front of the principals, and I had been a colleague of theirs. So I felt like they did trust my judgment and know that we were doing everything that we could. And I just talked frankly with them. Hey, we have to provide these services. I know there are going to be hiccups. I know it's not going to be perfect, but we need to try something because again, not providing those services puts us at risk and we're burning out our folks. I just tell it like it is, to be honest. And then working with our SLPs that were already in person was very important. Uh, when I took on this role, we started meeting with them monthly to get feedback on what needed to happen, what they were struggling with, how we could possibly make their jobs more doable. And then we talked to them about the virtual therapy, and again, they felt the same way, like, "We don't know if it'll be successful, but we agree we need to try something." Like, these are students, they agreed about the high school, middle school, type model first, like, let's try it small, let's see how it goes." And so building that trust, and then really just talking with all stakeholders. So, our contact person at Huddle Up. At that time, it was Taylor. Now it's Chelsea. Like we have a great relationship. I talk to them on the phone. I've talked to them on the phone. The emails, just talking through scenarios or issues that we might have. But then also brainstorming with principals and our process consultants in buildings on how we can make this work without adding extra staff. So we don't have pairs that come and run speech groups. That's something that was also a no because when we're paying for services, we can't then pay for an additional person to sit in there and maintain the computer. So we strategized on what positions do we already have in place that could potentially run or host the speech language groups. And we settled on our libraries. We have librarians within those and lots of times library aides. Sometimes it is a para that has a time off. Some of our special education teachers have large classrooms and they're like, hey, I want to host the group over here. I can then make sure they're all on and they're doing their therapies and I can run other things while that's happening. So, really just bringing everyone on board and talking that through and knowing upfront one, we know this is not perfect. We know it's not our best scenario and that a person in body
Right.
would be the very best option, but we didn't have a choice. And I think that everyone knew that. And then again, just developing systems within the buildings to make sure that students are getting to their therapies and that there's a line of communication. So, one thing we've really tried to do is if we have providers that have serviced a building, we try to keep them there if possible because they already have that relationship with the process consultants, the principals, and any staff members within the building. There's an open line of communication. Usually it's through email, but many of them have, talk back and forth on the cell phone. And our process consultants were really given a directive from me to serve as that liaison of helping them to get acquainted with the case managers, the principals, and to ensuring that we had a good system of whether it was we're going to blue pass these kids every day at this time, or we know that the teacher has a list and they're going to send it and they have a timer on the phone, like what system to get students to their therapies, um, were all things that we had to discuss during all that time.
Incredibly thorough and not the easy button by
Yeah,
any means.
not
It was a
easy.
process, but I think the pragmatic approach you've taken, smaller implementation to start, understand where your early wins are, and then bringing other stakeholders in is incredibly
Mhm.
important. So thank you for sharing that. One stakeholder group we hadn't touched on yet, and
Mhm.
that was parents. Uh,
Yeah.
so can you tell us a little bit about, I'm sure they were curious and cautious about this approach, but
Yes.
I'm thinking that you've expressed to them that we're doing what's best for your students. But can you tell us a little bit more about how you gave them confidence in the process and who's on the
Yeah.
other end of the screen?
Yeah. So originally, I'm gonna be honest, parents were not happy. They called and they demanded in-person therapists only, and I said, "Well, that isn't an option. We don't have the individuals, and our obligation as a district is to provide the services," which is what we're doing. And I talked them through it and said, "Listen, I'm also, again, very open and honest with parents. I'm not saying this is gonna be perfect. I'm not saying that virtual therapy is going to be perfect for every student, but we have to give this a try because it is our only option. There are not therapists coming out of the woodwork. I've told them the same thing I told you. We had an opening for 4 years that no one applied for. I've called universities, we've done everything with the pay that we could possibly do, and they're just not out there. So this is our option." And, again, we sent letters as well to all of our families explaining virtual therapy, and just stating all of that. Then all the Huddle Up therapists also connect with families and make sure that they understand how that looks. Many of our principals also communicated. So in the beginning, it was rough, and a few of them were like, "Absolutely not. I'm not doing this." But that was the beginning, and that was before they started. And I'm gonna say I think it was as little as 2 weeks that I started, getting feedback from those parents that originally were disgusted with our choices to say, "We are sorry that we were so negative at the beginning because our child, 1, loves going to therapy, 2, is much more engaged and involved in that process." And I think it won them over really quickly. I mean, you're still gonna have a few parents that every once in a while, they'll say, "I really want an in-person therapist." I get that, I do too, but I think once they see, some of those services and what it looks like or hear from their kids, that all stopped very quickly.
That was one of my closing questions here. Maybe you can amplify it a bit. What about the kids? Do you have a moment that sticks at you when you looked in observation or had a note from a parent that said, "We're doing what's right and this is working"? Do you have a moment you could share?
Yeah. So, I think it's probably that first year of implementation, and it was a parent that was a little finicky,
Mhm.
so to speak anyway, and their child had really gotten to the point that the in-person provider was not being effective with their child, and their child was also not engaging with the in-person therapist. It just done. They were all done, for many reasons, and I don't think that was any, one person's fault. And that parent then demanded a new in-person therapist, and I said, "That's not gonna be an option." The virtual providers is what we're looking towards. Everyone in the district is at that point, everyone in the district is receiving the same type of service. I want you, to give it a try. And that parent was hard to win over, but that kid is the one that sold it.
Great.
Going home and saying, "I have never felt this way about therapy. I feel like I'm making progress." And I believe that student was, within that next year, released from services. They'd graduated out and met all their goals, but just that parent called me and apologized for their behavior and then explained some of that, um, conversation that their child had had with them at home, and it really sold us, sold them on the program and that it was the right thing, and they appreciated that we were providing those services.
That's wonderful. And as an educator, empathy is probably the word we don't, we don't speak into existence enough, but really putting yourself in that, you probably responded to those parents in a way of understanding where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And hearing them helps you build that trust into, and that's a wonderful story. Um, I have one other comment here to close out here and give you back the rest of your day.
Mhm.
When you look back and your staff, not only the principals that you are working to support and the staff in those buildings, but your colleagues at district office, is once the services have stabilized, what did you lose sleep over? What did you stop losing sleep over? Or what was a weight or a burden that you felt that came off to help allocate some of those other once the process started working?
Yeah, there were a lot of things that came off my plate with this, I'm gonna be honest. I was in the mode of constantly searching for providers in any way that I could and utilizing different services and different providers. And I still use a mixed method with our district. We have some contracted providers that are in person. We have a few contracted providers that are virtual, and then we use Huddle Up. I think what I also quit losing sleep over is the fact that we're providing the services and students aren't missing out on those services. That that really bothered me. That bothered me from a principal perspective, an educator perspective, a parent perspective, a director perspective. So I could see that from all all lenses. And then also really what we have done in our district is all students preschool through second grade receive in-person therapies, and then all students third through 12th grade, with the exception of our students that are extremely um, behind and need extra support and struggle to communicate anyway. We service all of those students virtually. And I think that the preschool piece, used to bother me, like, it felt like we couldn't get enough providers to service those students, and by shifting
Yes.
the students that we serviced in person, I could make sure that that was taken care of, and then I don't worry as much about the 3rd through 12th grade because we have Huddle Up. It's all pretty well organized at this point in time. I don't know if we're 4 or 5 years in at this point, but, just it's more seamless, like, these are the buildings I need, taken care of, these are the students, these are the caseload minutes, and so I quit losing sleep over that because I was the one trying to manage that, and then I have an SLP department chair. We were both racking our brains all the time trying to schedule, uh, the therapists that we did have. We knew that we were killing them off, so to speak, and we were gonna lose more therapists in that process, and we didn't want that to happen because they deserve to not be overworked as well. So
Absolutely.
I think that model has really helped us to balance, our in-person therapists, the parent aspect, the student aspect, and make sure that we are providing services for everyone that needs them.
Well, I don't think we could end on a stronger comment about so we can deliver services to every student that needs it. So thank you very much, Dr. Anderson. This has been a wonderful chat, and thank you so much for your time. Truly appreciate it, and I think the audience will take away many nuggets on how to bring back to their district. So thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Subscribe to our channel on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If you want to learn more about Huddle Up and how we partner to help districts provide services to students, visit us at huddleupcare.com or email us at connect@huddleupcare.com. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.